Released back in 1985 in the United States, the NES snuck its way back into the household following the downfall of the Atari 2600. Initially using Rob the Robot and the Zapper to disguise the fact it wasn't a quote video game, with Super Mario Bros. Lurking inside like the Trojan horse myth, but was in fact a children's toy, it didn't take long for consumer perception and strength to be restored and for the video game industry in the US to kick off once more. The NES is home to some of the all-time classics: Zelda, Mega Man 2, Contra, Ninja Gaiden, and even some of the weird ones like McKids, the Mario 3 McDonald's ripoff, which immediately spring to mind. But once you've played all of those, then what do you play? I've comprised a fairly solid list of games covering a variety of genres I'd actually track down and play at home with some family and friends. I've searched high and low, played some great games and some not so great ones to present to you what I choose to actually bring to my next family barbecue alongside the classics. I'm going to kick things off with a game even the NES veterans aren't expecting. Here's Eliminator Boat Duel, released in 1991 by Sculpted Software and Radioactive Software. The game is essentially a mixture between Micro Machines and the blacklist races that need to be defeated in Need for Speed Most Wanted. In this game, you race powerboats against increasingly dangerous rivals. Along the way, you earn money to upgrade your boat by setting track records, rescuing spectators who have fallen in the water, dodging hazards, and defeating your rival. Between each race, you use your cash to repair your boat and add weaponry that you'll need to not only stay alive, but also dominate the opposition, who quickly becomes more skilled and uses some really sharp AI to try and finish first. The game is graphically impressive for the time, offering a large playfield, multiple camera angles, start line launches, and photo finishes across 3 unique racecourses. In total, the game has 24 stages and is more than likely to hold your attention for several hours, as the frame rate is rock solid, the controls are perfect, and there's a decent level of risk and reward when venturing back out into the water, especially as you can't save. The game can be had for around £30 today, but interestingly enough, Eliminator Boat Duel is one of the only NES games that features a typo on the end label. So once you've bought it and put it on your shelf, you can look at it every time you glance at your collection and be slightly annoyed, like a fun 80s version of Cyberpunk that you can't even take back. Up next is a personal favourite of mine that has rightly gained a solid reputation in the retro gaming community in the last 10 years. This is Felix the Cat, developed by Hudson Soft in 1992, the creators of Bomberman, Fester's Quest, and hilariously, Milon's Secret Castle. Felix the Cat himself is a character that first made his appearance in the 1919 short film Feline Follies. What we're looking at here is his 1990 rebrand to compete alongside the likes of DuckTales and the Ninja Turtles. Felix the Cat is a side-scrolling action platformer in the same vein as Super Mario Bros. 3. In this game, you play as Felix as you attempt to rescue your girlfriend Kitty from the Mad Professor across 9 unique levels. The game is notable for its super smooth scrolling, cushiony controls, unique power-ups, and moderate to easy difficulty level. What makes Felix the Cat a fun game is both the level design and the power-up system. Each level is made up of 3 stages with a good amount of side-scrolling and verticality, and the enemies are well placed, meaning you won't simply crash into them and die. The bosses are fairly balanced too, offering an approachable challenge for new players, which makes this a great game to begin with alongside Super Mario Bros. Along the way, you collect power-ups that increase Felix's offensive ability. These power-ups provide Felix with items like a hot air balloon to fly over hazards, a tank that lets you jump higher and fire projectiles from a distance, and at one point in the game you can even ride a dolphin into battle. Now that's pretty cool. Today, the US version of the game will cost you around £100. Without question, Felix the Cat is a solid entry into your library and is worth a shot if you can find it in the wild.
The only game to feature a penguin on this list, Yume Penguin Monogatari, is a hybrid platformer / shooter for the Famicom, developed by Konami in 1991, and it's surprisingly good. In this game, you play as Penta, who, believe it or not, gets dumped by his girlfriend Penko because he's become too fat for her. The goal of the game is to win back Penko's love by losing weight by collecting diet drinks and avoiding enemies. In addition, Ginji, Penko's new boyfriend, is trying to block your attempts at reconnecting by dispatching enemies to force feed you back to obesity. I'm not kidding, how does someone even come up with this? It makes McDonald Land look tame, with Ronald McDonald approaching children in broad daylight asking to find his magic bag. Despite the game's bizarre plotline and thematic elements, the core of the game is solid. In the platforming stages, you have unlimited health and cannot die, but must continually keep your weight meter down to fulfill the requirements of the level. When you are larger in stature, you are a slower, larger target with less of an attack range, and when you are lighter, you can shoot further and jump higher. In the flying stages, the game becomes a side-scrolling shooter like Life Force, which again is well made and feels properly implemented. The game only has 6 levels, which means you are likely to complete it in your first or second playthrough, as it's quite an easy and approachable adventure. Even though this game is more of a commentary on perceived societal standards in Japan at the time, it's quite fun and it should set you back about £40, with most of that being import charges post-COVID. It's definitely worth a look. Kung Fu is one of 4 black box entries that make it to this list, and it's a game I personally think you should order alongside your NES on day one, as it's a great introduction to the console. In this game, you play as Kung Fu Master Thomas, and it's up to you to save your girlfriend Sylvia from Mr. X, who lurks inside the Devil's Temple. The game is your standard move to the left, and sometimes right, side-scrolling beat-em-up, but the gameplay here is surprisingly solid with a silky smooth frame rate and a definite sense of control and agency over the action on screen. Across 5 levels, Thomas utilises a series of kicks, punches, and jump combinations to defeat the array of baddies that spring out at you and the boss character at the end of the stage. Whilst most action is taking out the enemies, the game is also a memory test. Each enemy type has its own movement and attack pattern, and each floor of the temple has its own gimmick, like falling pots or snakes. As you progress through the game, each new floor carries the tricks of the previous floor, meaning you not only have to memorise the previous level, but also act quickly when new threats arrive. Today, the game can be had for around £10 and is a great next game to play after you've finished the Super Mario Bros. Dark Hunt cartridge, as it's easy to pick up and play, challenging, and features that iconic black box look. Gunsmoke, or Gun.Smoke, is a vertically scrolling run-and-gun shooter with a ton of staying power, released in 1985 for the NES by Capcom. In this game, you play as Billy Bob the Bounty Hunter, and it is your mission to hunt down and kill the wanted outlaws known as the Wingates for the local townsfolk of Hickstoof. If you remember the bounty missions in Red Dead Redemption 2 at the Sheriff's Office, it's basically that, the NES game, as a shoot-'em-up. The objective of each stage is to blast away everyone with a gun, collect money and bonuses such as a horse to take more hits and boots to move faster, upgrade your weapons and ammunition, and collect the wanted sign hidden along the path to find the location of the wanted henchmen, who are significantly stronger than the baddies you've been happily gunning down thus far. Gunsmoke is unique because you don't fire in a conventional way. The B button shoots to the left and the A button shoots to the right, and when you tap them together you fire forward. As you can probably tell from the gameplay, you're going to have to hammer the buttons for around 40 minutes solid to get to the end, making the game both a mental test and a physical test, and that's why you're going to want a turbo controller. The game is notable now for being somewhat out of touch, featuring a level where you as an American cowboy gun down a village of Native Americans. But you've got to remember this game was made nearly 40 years ago and it's a product of its time, and the Native Americans level is tucked away deep into the game, making it one of the hardest levels by far. Gunsmoke is an excellent adaptation to the NES, and a copy can be had for around £30 to £50 today and is great fun for an afternoon of gameplay. See if you can find it. Guerrilla War is without question the easiest game on this list, but also the most controversial. Released in 1987 by SNK, the company that would go on to release the Neo Geo AVS and MVS, this game is an overhead run-and-gun adventure that features, believe it or not, Che Guevara and Fidel Castro as they raid an unnamed Caribbean island to free it from the clutches of the tyrannical dictator. In the same vein of a game like Ikari Warriors, you and a friend can pilot your communist hero of choice as you blast away what we can assume to be the forces of capitalism. Across 8 or so levels, you must traverse the entire island, piloting tanks and lobbing grenades at everything that moves to progress through the stages. At the end of each level, you face some variety of boss character or huge target, such as these 2 lunatics throwing grenades out of Scoop from Bob the Builder, or the entire crew of this submarine. Guerrilla War is notable for having unlimited continues and lives, which means you're probably going to finish this on your first playthrough. The game is about half an hour long and it's excellent fun with 2 people, with decent pacing, a solid frame rate and plenty of overpowered weapons to choose from. The game can be had for around £40 and is a solid choice if you want an overhead shooter. Who doesn't love Balloon Fight? Released in 1984 by Nintendo as part of the Black Box series of games for the NES, in this game, you take control of one of 2 balloon fighters with 2 balloons attached to his or her helmet. The objective of the game is to traverse the board, landing on other people's balloons, popping them to drop them into the river below. Along the way you have to avoid stage hazards, enemy combatants, and the crocodile that lurks in the river below. The game predates Super Mario Bros, and the core design of the game was the inspiration for the balloon battle mode in Mario Kart DS that you're likely familiar with. In addition to the main game, you can take part in the balloon trip mode. In this game, you must successfully navigate a maze of spiky projectiles that litter the screen, earning points the further along you can get. The big attraction to this game though is the 2-player mode. It takes the pick up and play challenge of the game and adds your friends to the mix, with all their sneaky strategies, trash talk and banter. No longer is Balloon Fight about making it to the end, it's about pushing the other player into the crocodile and stealing their points. An absolute must for your NES. As a weird side note, this game sort of appeared as a Hello Kitty game on the Famicom as Hello Kitty World.
All of the modes from Balloon Fight are present, with some, let's say, creative liberties having been taken, with additional elements like the music being borrowed from Nintendo World Championships. It's a strange game with a choppy frame rate that, outside its blatant piracy, would never be spoken about ever again. But weirder still is that Balloon Fight was copied yet again, reappearing as Adam and Eve on the Coltrane 6-in-1 cartridge and as a Spanish release by Glock Video. Do yourself a favour and pick up Balloon Fight for the Famicom. Its asking price is around £10 online and you'll get hours of enjoyment out of it. It's a must-have. There's a reason why games like Contra are headlining acts for the NES. Games you and a friend can sit down and blast away everything on screen with some beer and pizza are always going to be big sellers, especially when Konami is at the helm, and thankfully, Jackal, released in 1986, is no exception. In this game, you play as the crew of a military jeep and must gun down hostile enemy forces while rescuing prisoners of war trapped in military bases across 6 expansive levels. As you might expect from a Konami adaptation to the NES, the gameplay is stellar with smooth scrolling, loads of enemies on screen, and fast-paced action throughout. Along the way, you and a friend use your machine guns and grenade launchers that can later be upgraded to rocket launchers to destroy everything on screen, and can even use the body of your jeep to run down enemy combatants. If you're able to save multiple hostages at once and make it back to the helipad and escort them out of the stage, you can earn extra lives, power-ups, and continues. At the end of each stage, you face off against a boss, such as waves of tanks, statues that fire missiles, and aircraft carriers, all classic Konami action. This game is excellent fun with a friend, and is a must-have game that can be found for around £20. Rally Bike has no real business being on a list like this, but I absolutely love it and its insane difficulty level. Released for the NES in 1990, Rally Bike is an arcade-style racing game where you as the driver must make it to the end of the stage whilst passing a set amount of drivers and making at least one mandatory stop for gas along the way. The trick is though that the game is notoriously difficult, with one-hit deaths, sparse checkpoints, and stages designed to feel a little bit too long to keep you on your toes. At the end of each stage, you can upgrade your bike, if you ever make it that far, and on occasion a helicopter may drop items down to pick up, such as extra fuel and turbos. The gameplay is absolutely rock solid, with a good frame rate, tight controls, and some cheerful music. However, because of the game's deceptive difficulty and 6 massive stages, Rally Bike quickly becomes a cruel trick that you can play on a friend, like luring a friend over to play PlayStation, only for the game of choice to be Bubsy 3D. Or getting an unsuspecting friend to eat an incredibly hot chili. Rally Bike is a fun game, and it's the kind of title that puts bums in the seats, keeps them there, and has the group itching to try just one more time. Today you can snag a copy for around £30. Every now and then, a game will come along that genuinely impresses you, and F1 Race for the Famicom is that kind of game for me. Released in 1984 by HAL Laboratory and Nintendo, the duo that would later put out Kirby's Adventure, F1 Race is one of the earliest titles designed by Satoru Iwata. In this game, you take control of a pair of Formula 1 cars that must navigate 15 stages set across 3 difficulty levels. F1 Race is impressive because of the speed and smoothness of the scrolling, and the controls feel incredibly responsive. The track design is clever, corners don't simply appear out of nowhere, and you even get that cool outrun control style where you have to change up on the D-pad to reach the high gear. Impressive stuff for 1984. When you consider that the NES has a litany of simulation racing games themed around a driver or a circuit or whatever else someone could stick on the box, that, let's be honest, all kind of suck. Outside of maybe Rad Racer or Al Unser Jr. Turbo Racing, F1 Race stands above them all as a game that any member of your family can play and is actually fun, especially at conventions. The game has a solid gameplay hook and still captures the charm of playing old school Nintendo, which is excellent. Today, a copy can be had for around £6 and is a defining reason why I own a Famicom to NES adapter. Everybody needs to play Excite Bike at least once in their lives. Released in 1985 for the NES as part of the Black Box series of games by Nintendo, Excite Bike puts you behind the wheel of a motocross stunt bike as you race and complete tricks in a crowded stadium. Set across 5 stages, you as the rider must successfully beat the marked time to progress to the next level. The stages are full of obstacles of varying depths, heights, terrains, and other aggressive riders who want nothing more than to throw you off the track and steal your place. The trick to mastering this game is to understand the positioning and balancing of your bike, and to understand how to make best use of the B button that can give you a boost at the risk of blowing up your engine. Excite Bike is famous for its colourful graphics, tight control, and track editor that even I can use to make something actually coherent and fun to use. For some of our younger viewers, you may recognise the track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as Excite Bike Arena. Well, this is where that stage actually comes from, and it's absolutely worth a play, as the game, despite being nearly 40 years old, is great fun to play. A copy can be had online for around £12, and if you don't have an NES kicking about, can be played via Nintendo Switch Online, or as a downloadable title for the Nintendo 3DS. Popeye is the most recent addition to my personal NES collection, and I absolutely love it. Released in 1985, this Shigeru Miyamoto adaptation of the legendary Popeye arcade game gracefully lands on the NES and is a solid entry into the Black Box series. In this game, you play as the legendary comic book sailor Popeye as he attempts to rescue Olive Oyl across 3 stages while doing his best to avoid the Sea Hag and numerous other hazards from the comic book series. In level 1, the objective is to collect all the hearts that Olive Oyl drops down to the ground. In level 2, you must collect music notes, and in level 3, you must collect the characters that spell out the word help. In each stage, there are clever ways to avoid Brutus, such as using the seesaw or by collecting Popeye's famous spinach that allows him to power up and punch him off the screen. You can also punch and dodge projectiles that litter the playfield, much like the action in Kung Fu. Today this game can be readily found for £25 and is a great early arcade experience you can still rush home to play after a busy day at work. Let's be honest, Musashi no Ken from 1986 sounds like a completely generic shogi or go adaptation for the Famicom that should be avoided by 99% of all audiences. However, this game is anything but rubbish. This adaptation of its sports anime source material has you playing as Musashi as he trains to become just as good as his parents at Kendo. In this game, you follow the plot of the anime and train alongside your Akita puppy by brandishing your sword and outrunning him to the end of 3 stages by destroying obstacles and enemies and collecting swords along the way to unlock special strike moves that can be used in the tournament in the second act. In the second half of the game, you must face off against a number of opponents in a Street Fighter-esque tournament, which plays surprisingly well. The graphics, music, and sound effects are all good for the time, and the control is absolutely spot on. Platforming and striking is precise, and it feels almost like playing Ninja Gaiden, which is very high praise indeed. The game is comprised of what feels like 7 to 8 levels and will set you back around £40 complete in box after shipping. It's well worth a look, as even though you may have never seen the anime it belongs to, the game itself is good fun. Hockey games on the NES tend to be decent, but I think beats out Nintendo's ice hockey by a puck. See what I did there? Released in 1987 by Konami, this arcade-style ice hockey game has you competing as one of 8 teams inspired by real teams from the US and Canada as you battle it out to win the cup. Blades of Steel is famous for its lightning-fast gameplay, arcade-style action, fighting, tossing out most of the conventional rules, and using excellent voice sampling. During standard gameplay, A passes the puck and B tackles and shoots, with up and down on the D-pad serving as control for the goaltender. If 2 skaters continually crash into another, a Tekken-style fight is initiated that if won provides an instant power play to the winner without penalisation. So as you might imagine, the game is fast-paced, aggressive, and is prone to all kinds of trash talking between you and your friends. During the second intermission, the player has the opportunity to play either a minigame which serves as an advert for games like Contra, and also acts as a little nod to the spaceship shooter Gradius. Blades of Steel is incredibly common, and whilst you probably won't want to do a whole season today, a game or 2 with a group of friends is a great way to kick off an evening, especially as a copy will set you back around £10. Nintendo World Cup is my top pick for the go-to football or soccer game for the NES, released by Technos Japan in 1990, and was featured as part of the 3-in-1 triple cut for some revisions of the NES in Europe. Borrowing characters from the famous Kunio-kun series, the same series that River City Ransom belongs to, Nintendo World Cup has you playing as one of 6 international teams with colourful graphics, a clever control scheme, and a rocking soundtrack. The gameplay is your standard football affair, but before each match you can decide how you want your teammates to act and play in response to your gameplay style, much like the Super Psychic series on the Neo Geo. When you don't have the ball during gameplay, you can issue commands to your teammates such as pass, shoot, lob, or volley, which allows you to not only play Nintendo World Cup as you would FIFA, but also use your teammates to carry out your plans in creative and cunning ways. The NES was a dominant force in the US market, so it's understandable that the console features some standout American football titles such as Tecmo Bowl. However, over here in the UK, we really got the short end of the stick with football games, with titles like Goal by Jaleco serving as more of a sloppy second than anything else. So Nintendo World Cup sticks out as not only a good game, but also a game you'd actually want to sit down and play. Today a copy can easily be had for around £5 and is definitely worth a pickup. I really like tennis games. They're easy to pick up and play, they're family friendly so everyone can get involved at Christmas, and usually don't cost a lot either. And in my opinion, Family Tennis for the Famicom is the best on the system, beating out Black Box Tennis and Jimmy Connor's Tennis. Released in 1987 by Namco, Family Tennis puts you on the court with 15 other tennis professionals inspired by real athletes from the time. Family Tennis is unique in that instead of having 16 variations of the same white guy, the game features women and African American players, silky smooth scrolling and intuitive gameplay. And thankfully, unlike Black Box Tennis, the serving is considerably easier and allows players to pick up a controller and adjust to the flow of the game much faster. The gameplay is most similar to Anna Kournikova's Smash Court Tennis on the PlayStation, so if you remember that game or the Smash Tennis series in general, the game will be immediately familiar to you. Interestingly, the game even features a watch mode where the computer creates action on the fly, rather than by following a script. It's quite clever. Today, a copy can be had for around £8 for the Famicom and remains regularly played in our household. You should definitely check it out. Everyone needs a family-friendly button masher in their collection, so why not have two? Track and Field 1 and 2 make their appearance on the NES as official conversions by Konami and are must-haves for the console. In these games, you take control of an Olympic hopeful as you compete across a variety of stages such as the 100-meter sprint, swimming, shooting, fencing, and more as you compete for the gold medal. The gameplay typically consists of tapping A and B in succession to make your character run, jump, and swim, and using A to time your action over hurdles or fire at the most opportune moment. Between the two games, there are 21 events to participate in, and all of them can be quickly learned and mastered, making these two ideal titles for family gatherings. Of the two, Track and Field is the more expensive game, coming in at around £30, with Track and Field 2 coming in at around £10, and feeling like an expansion pack to the first game, filled to the brim with everything they wanted to pack in the first one but didn't have time to. The graphics are good, the gameplay is intuitive, and the feeling you get from playing the arcade game definitely translates well here, as the NES and the arcade board are of a similar hardware spec. Even if you aren't a fan of sports games, these games are definitely worth tracking down. RC Pro-Am 2 is one of the few racing games that I genuinely love on the NES. Released in 1992 by Rare, the studio that would go on to make GoldenEye, in this game, you play as a kid who travels to their local park to win the local remote control racing car championship to earn cash prizes. RC Pro-Am 2 is a great example of an isometric overhead racing game done right, and it massively improves upon the first game, most notably removing the frequency of the tyre screeching, which does become annoying 20 minutes into the game. The action here is fast paced, the screen is zoomed out enough to give you a decent chance of driving rather than just reacting, and the stage design itself is basic, yet complex enough to both be in line with the game's story and fun to play. As you drive and collect power-ups to win races, you can take your cash and upgrade your car to improve its performance, handling, and durability. Standard stuff for the genre, but the trick here is that your ability to corner actually outweighs the necessity for outright speed, meaning you have to balance your own ability as a driver alongside your ability to stay on the track. At the end of each race, you are presented with a performance screen, and if you come in last place 3 times in a row, it's game over. The game is around 25 levels long and can be beaten in well under an hour. It's like the virtual equivalent of a basket of bread at a restaurant. It's a nice place to be, and it isn't a massive commitment, which keeps it fun. If you like games like Rock and Roll Racing on the Super Nintendo and Overtop on the Neo Geo, then you're going to absolutely love this. The only caveat is this game is somewhat rare and it will cost you around £150 for the genuine article. As a side note, I'm also going to give a shout out to the unlicensed Tengen port of Super Sprint from 1986. Most of the same comments can be made about this game also, just that instead of scrolling on a playfield, you have a static screen and support for up to 4 players using the 4-score adapter. The game is valued at around £30 and is one of the few unlicensed games you may actually want to consider owning. Here's Section Z. Yes, Z, this is an American release. A space shoot 'em up with a fun twist. It's part shooter, part puzzler. In this 1987 Capcom release, you play the role of an astronaut who's been sent to destroy an orbiting space station near the planet Earth, which is causing trouble in the galaxy. Unbeknownst to you though, is that the space station actually contains the evil alien empire who have their sights set on your homeworld, and your arrival on the scene triggers their assault. Whilst on the surface this may just appear to be yet another space shooter on the NES, this game is actually more of a mixture of Life Force that used the progression system of Outrun, with the inside of the ship serving as an entire colony to explore, full of baddies, traps, and different pathways to take. It's entirely possible that throughout your successful playthrough, your chosen route could lead to a boss room, dead end, secret, or even a chute that throws you back out into space to try again. It's one of those pen and paper, trial and error type of games that challenges both your trigger finger and planning and observation skills. In total, the game features 60 sections, multiple weapons, and a variety of ways to make it to the final boss, who, surprise surprise, lurks in Section Z. The graphics are fairly good for the time, and the scrolling is smooth too. Interestingly, much like Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, the game was released for the Famicom disk system and was designed to take advantage of the save game utility it featured, but when translated over to the NES, the game lacks this option, making it significantly harder. Today, a copy can be had for around £40 and is well worth a second look. Spartan X2 is the only beat-em-up style game on NES I actually like, outside of the big boys like River City Ransom. Developed by Tamtex and released by IRM, in this game you play the role of Johnny Thomas, a secret agent who seeks revenge for the murder of his family and is now the only citizen left in the city who openly opposes the drug syndicates that plague his concrete dystopia. The side-scrolling beat-em-up action here is fairly typical of the time, spanning across 6 levels, but the game is noticeably easier than its contemporaries with basic yet satisfying gameplay, meaning you may actually get to see the end. Before each level begins, you are given a target to find and a location to search, such as a moving train, a seedy warehouse, and an aeroplane. Upon arrival, it is up to you to defeat all the baddies who jump out and eventually progress to the boss who has their own gimmick. Along the way you can collect power-ups such as Stamina X potions to restore your life and utilise attacks like the uppercut to help clear the stage. The game is around an hour long and it doesn't outstay its welcome, which is a big plus for me. But believe it or not, this is actually a sequel to the Black Box Kung Fu game that we saw earlier on. A copy today can be had for around £50 and is on the rarer side, but it is worth tracking down. Nintendo World Championships, one of the holy grails for the NES. Like stadium events and Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, for most mere mortal the game remains out of reach. However, thanks to companies like RetroZone, reproduction cartridges can be had for around £50 either through their website or the second-hand market. For those of you that aren't aware, Nintendo World Championships was a nationwide competition that ran in 1990 across the United States, allowing players of all ages to compete for prizes, cash, and even a Ferrari. The winners of the competition were allowed to take home their specialised game cartridges alongside their prizes, and then several months later, several gold cartridges were released and given away as part of a Nintendo Power giveaway in their magazine competition. As you might imagine, these ultra-rare games command outrageous prices online as they represent the embodiment and pinnacle of Nintendo for fans all around the world. The cartridge itself is made up of 3 games and a timer. In Super Mario Bros. You need to collect 50 coins as fast as possible. In Rad Racer you need to complete a lap as fast as possible, and in Tetris you need to score as many points as possible before the timer runs out. A combination of these 3 scores then becomes your total. In my experience, the reproduction cartridge has been a smash hit at barbecues and parties, as all of our nerdy friends know the story but don't own a Nintendo NES to play the games themselves. All 3 titles are easy to pick up and play, so everyone can get involved, but you do genuinely feel a decent amount of pressure when you play in front of an audience, which is the real hook of the game. The competition can quickly heat up when the loser of the night has to pay for your beer and pizza. Despite genuine criticism from characters such as the angry video game nerd that you could spend around $20 and buy all 3 games individually and actually have the whole game instead of £5,000 on an overpriced game cartridge on a timer, the reproduction is still a solid choice for your next Halloween or Christmas party. So that's my list of 21 NES and Famicom games I think you should consider as additional games to fill out your library. If you've stayed until the end of the video, thank you. This list could go on forever, and I certainly have another 20 or so games to make up a follow-up video. So if that would interest you, or if you have any suggestions you think I would enjoy, pop them down in the comments below. Hey!
Hi.
Thanks for watching this episode of SnapbackWill. As always, I'd like to thank all of the lovely people on screen now for their hard work, insights, and contributions to the creation of this video. Next time we'll be taking a look at Doom. See you there!